Both Ashen Iron and Renegades are going to be the next major content drops for Destiny 2 moving forward. And now that we've had Getting On for a month inside of Edge of Fate and the new power systems, the portal, reward tiers and all of that, I feel like players are reaching much more of a consensus in regards to the kinds of changes that we'd like to see in Destiny moving forward. Bungie have outlined that they're looking at power progression and they generally want to increase the speed of progression for most players, but also they plan to balance portal rewards, essentially to make things like solo ops feel a bit less like the only option in terms of power progression. And they've even outlined that more difficult activities like the raid, which require a lot more coordination and generally are more challenging than lost sectors, essentially, that we're playing in the portal. And they want to tackle some of those things over the next few months. We should recognize that, but here I wanted to round up my feedback as well as a lot of the feedback that I'm seeing in the community at the moment regarding the way the game is actually playing. So if Bungie want Renegades to be more successful than Edge of Fate, at least in terms of player happiness, right, I think they've got a handful of things that they really need to tackle before we actually get to that drop. So I'm going to start out with new expansion content. Edge of Fate's been really weird in that regard because we have a new destination, a new activity on the destination, as well as quests and sort of endgame-ish components to Kepler, but a lot of it really is missing the mark. I might sound kind of harsh here, I don't intend to be simply harsh, but while there were loads of good components to the update that we've had, things like reward tiers, being able to get tier 5 gear, feels like a genuine improvement over what we had before this expansion, but there are significant flaws in the mix as well. So looking at new content, mythic campaign rewards in Renegades have to be significantly improved over what we got in Edge of Fate, because Bungie want to protect the tier system and their desire for players to actually grind power. They've essentially made certain pieces of content way less rewarding than they should be because they're accessible early on during the power climb. I personally think this is a mistake. Looking at Mythic Kepler, for instance, there's a whole fairly difficult campaign to rerun for the Mythic quest, but the big problem is that the rewards we get are incredibly minimal and limited when we look at things like getting one tier 5 weapon with fixed rolls. I think Bungie need to accept if they want players to engage with challenging content, then the rewards need to be up to a level that actually makes players want to engage with it, right? Also looking at Kepler, there are activities like Sieve. It doesn't really help that it is timed and it only comes up every couple of hours, but overall, I feel like players are not engaging with Kepler content anywhere near as much as they want to, which is bad because it's literally the new thing to do, right? There's a degree of exploration there, some sense of Destiny still being a universe to discover and kind of master, which is one of the big complaints now that the portal is the primary sort of source for activity content in the game. Yet on Kepler, it's largely wasted because Bungie are kind of fixated with forcing players to engage with the power system first. And I think power, challenge, and reward need to have a better relationship when it comes to pieces of content like mythic difficulty, world tiers. And generally, Bungie need to give us more reasons to actually engage with the new expansion content. I think that goes without saying, really, right? In terms of the power grind, I'd generally be okay with it being a bit less extreme, especially in the 400 to 450 bracket, but I think Bungie also need to seriously refactor rewards across portal activities, right? On top of the fact that we need more content to actually play in the portal, it seems pretty basic that if there's a 5-minute activity that drops one powerful reward, or a 15 or 30-minute activity that drops one reward, yeah, players are going to engage with the thing that rewards us faster. And because reward tiers are tied to power, if you're not at a power level to get better tier 4 or 5 drops from the bonus reward engrams, they're basically being ignored because players don't want tier 2 or 3 loot on the most part, and a lot of those bonus engrams are kind of being treated like scrap at the moment. And that's why ultimately a lot of players are preferring to just sit in solo ops because it's the most efficient thing to do. So Bungie really need to look at that. Probably more important overall than just the power climb though, as demonstrated by Solstice, I think Bungie need to improve the potential of rewards through the power climb. I'm not asking for free tier 5 loot, but feeling like you have to grind the number first in order to later get the gear overall isn't a good feeling, especially when the portal offers such a narrow selection of things to actually play for power. It's not about asking for things for free, as some players have said when I've commented on this before. The reality is right now, tier 5 loot is not hard to obtain. The only thing that makes it difficult is that you have to dump in a ridiculous number of hours, right? I think the journey to max power needs more opportunities to drop higher tier loot because the journey needs to be infused with more exciting rewards and kind of dopamine hits of actually getting something good, right? That includes more opportunity to be challenged and rewarded for said challenge. It's simply bad that the raid is dropping low tier loot, while lost sectors, which are not difficult, can drop tier 5 loot, right? As long as you've played enough of the game. That makes no real sense in regard to player enjoyment. The same with the Mythic campaign. A 5 or 6 hour quest which gives one tier 5 fixed role weapon doesn't really make any sense, when you can instead play the same activities over and over just to unlock power in order to eventually get better rewards. Right now, playing the highest number of hours is almost the only aspirational thing that actually exists in Destiny, with challenge being a secondary component, and I don't think that's overall going to be a healthy thing for the game, especially in the long term. Having said that, I do think at the same time it's clear that some players love having the grind back, and I'm not saying that we should take that away. If anything, just because players could get some tier 4 or 5 loot a bit earlier in the power climb, it doesn't take away from tier 5s becoming targetable and regular at the highest power levels. That does have some merit, because if players want to grind 12 hours a day or whatever, fine. They should be rewarded for that, right? However, I don't think it's a good thing that players feel like the only mode in which the game can actually be rewarded is this incredibly linear power climb. Progression needs to be less linear and less about one specific thing, because while there is a decent number of players who engage with a very long grind, I'd say that there's probably a larger number of players who simply cannot do that because they have responsibilities outside of Destiny, right? That doesn't make them a bad player. It just means they've got less time to actually put into the game. So overall, Bungie need to refactor reward tiers and seriously consider how challenge fits into this as well. I don't particularly like the trend of grind over challenge right now, because on the most part, challenge really isn't being rewarded, especially. Engagement is though. And I think it feels weird that tier 5 loot right now is dropping essentially towards the end of the grind. Whereas I think most players would like to actually use that juicy high tier loot as they continue on that power climb, much like what the Solstice weapons have done in the last couple of weeks. The issue is, by the time you get higher tier loot, you're very close to essentially being finished with the grind. Then in a few months, the incentive to use those pieces of gear kind of go out the window thanks to the new gear bonus. And that would be another big thing I would talk about. I think Bungie need to ditch the new gear thing entirely. I think at this point, it's almost universal that players don't particularly like it. It offers no benefit or improvement to the gameplay experience for players. However, I do think new gear could potentially offer more of a benefit. Maybe a more fun way to do a similar thing would be if specific activities actually had a boost when using new gear, which has, I don't know, a 10 or 20% chance to increase the reward tier by +1. If Bungie applied this to seasonal conquests, for example, it would still be optional, which is a good thing, but it would also still encourage the use of new gear in a way that actually rewards players and feels a bit more engaging, instead of it simply being a rule where the only benefit is that you're actually allowed to play the activity. So yeah, generally I think Bungie need to make the game more rewarding. I also don't think that players overall like new gear affecting reward score in the portal, and the same can be said for having your highest power equipped at all times. How many times in Destiny history have Bungie done that and then undone it based on player feedback? It's a mechanic that only really serves to increase engagement when Bungie look at their analytics, and it has basically no benefit for players. It also forces excessive infusion, scrapping of loot, and actually further limits the kind of rewards that players are going to use. So for me at the moment, those would be my biggest pieces of feedback. Of course, there's a lot more that we could talk about, whether it's improvements to stats, exotics in the game, other system elements like having more things to actually play in the portal. There's a lot of stuff that Bungie need to improve, but I think at the core of the game, the actual investment part of Destiny, in many respects, that's almost the most important thing at this precise moment that Bungie need to improve. A better focus on the new content actually being valuable in terms of rewards is going to be really key for Renegades. You know, it's a shame in a lot of ways that players just don't feel like engaging with a lot of the Kepler stuff, because it's far from the most rewarding content in the game, but it also is some of the most challenging content that's actually in Destiny right now. You know, if you go into World Tier 5, I don't particularly think it should matter if you're at 300 power and not 450 or 550. If players a bit earlier on in the climb can actually go in there, get some juicy rewards, also still be earning power, and then ultimately come out of it with more incentive to continue engaging with other stuff the rest of the portal, then I think it will do a lot for players actually enjoying their time spent in the game, and also will make it less of a requirement to dump in numerous hours a day in order to actually get rewards in a timely fashion, right? I don't buy the argument that that is asking for free loot. I'd rather play something challenging and get a good reward from it, as opposed to play something incredibly easy but do it for 10 hours just to bump up the number and subsequently start getting better rewards from content which is also relatively easy. It just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense right now, and I also think it's possible for Bungie to keep more different types of players engaging with the game and actually enjoying it without it feeling like a second job. As I've mentioned though, if players want to play Destiny essentially like it's a job, that should also be rewarded. Asking for one thing is not the same as saying the other is invalid, right? That's why I think it's worth hammering home this feedback right now, because I think if we carry on the same trajectory we're on at the minute, we're just going to see more players stop engaging with the game, and that's going to do nobody any favors. It's not going to help hardcore gamers who want to play all day. It's not going to help Bungie. It's not going to help the more casual players. It will just hurt everybody simultaneously. So Bungie need to seriously think about that. And And ultimately now, the good thing is that the foundation is there. The tier system has been implemented, the power system, the engagement systems, the progression systems, they're all here, and there's lots of stuff which actually has the potential to work really well. It just needs to be tuned in the appropriate way, and Bungie do need to let go of some of the fixation around engagement. And anyone who says Bungie are not fixated on engagement, that's just, it's madness. Like, I don't understand how some of the decisions Bungie have made in this release are actually defensible whatsoever. I'm basically saying get it right while there is still the opportunity to do so. Plus, I think a lot of these systems will actually change if we even go into another year of content in 2026, because it's all well and good doing it right now with Edge of Fate, but I struggle to see how players would want to do it another 3 times in the next year and a half, unless the right kinds of changes are made. So that's my feedback. Give me your thoughts down below. I've got nothing else to say about it. I'm still enjoying the grind. I'm just shy of 400 power now, so I need to get in there before Solstice goes away so I can try and finish my high stat armor grind. I'm actually enjoying it. I just think the game's got so much more to give than what it's giving right now. And the good thing is that theoretically, it can only get better if Bungie make the right choices. So give me your thoughts. If you've enjoyed the video, hit subscribe for more content, and otherwise I'll catch you guys very soon.